Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to my next Deep Purple video, where today we're going to be talking about the albums released in the 2010s. So that includes 2013's Now What, and 2017's Infinite. Both very, very good albums. I'm looking forward to talking about these two. First of all, I should apologize. I do apologize to my viewers. It's been a little while since my last upload, about 2 or 3 weeks. I was hoping to get all the Deep Purple videos done in like one kind of big succession, but long story short, I'm a busy guy. It's summertime here. I've got a 2-year-old at home, and I've also got a gig lined up for the end of the summer, my first one in a few months. So I got to do a lot of rehearsing and practicing and making sure my drum chops are still in order so I can get up there and play. But in any case, I'll always be continuing to do the videos. Sometimes, there'll be little breaks. I've tried to be pretty upfront and honest about that. Sometimes I do get busy when my calendar fills up. Unfortunately, my activities on YouTube are typically one of the first things to go on the back burner, but just is the way it is. But I've got some time, and I was able to listen to some Deep Purple, so we're good to go. I also took a little bit of break from listening to Deep Purple because I think I oversaturated myself a little bit, in doing the albums from Mark 1 up to Rapture of the Deep there. And, of course, after Rapture of the Deep, the band does take a bit of an extended break, so I figured, I'll take a break as well. And that way I could kind of listen to these more recent albums with fresh ears, which is probably a good idea. But there you go. Before I dive into it, obviously, it should be worth noting, as of me recording this video right now, the new Deep Purple album =1 was released. I've listened to it a couple of times. Once on the I've listened more than a couple of times, and I've listened to it once on my sound system and a few times in the car here and there. First impressions, I think it's a very, very good album. I will say I do miss Steve Morse a little bit. Steve Morse, being a fusion guy, he does bring a certain jazzy, sort of proggy element to the band, which I found was lacking on the new album, but that's nothing against Simon McBride. He's obviously a very, very good guitar player, and I think, he brings more of a traditional rock approach to the band, and yeah, we'll talk more about that when I do a full review of the new album. But for now, we're talking about the Mark 8 albums in the 2000s, or in the 2010s. Sorry. So goes without saying, Mark 8 does include Ian Gillan on lead vocals, Steve Morse on guitar, Don Airey on keyboards, Roger Glover on bass, and the ever-present Ian Pace on drums. So, in this lineup, it should be stated, is by far the longest lived lineup and the most stable and drama-free lineup of the band as well. Steve Morse leaves the band in 2022, so they're around for 19 years consecutively, and the run of albums that they do, so that's Bananas, Rapture of the Deep, Now What, Infinite, and Whoosh. That's 5 albums. That is the longest stretch of albums released by Deep Purple with the exact same lineup. So, even though they're not at their kind of commercial peak at this point, I think historically you can look at this period of the band's history as being pretty significant. Even though their recorded output wasn't as prolific as it was back in the day, they were certainly very, very busy. They were certainly, they were touring a lot around this time. There's a few noteworthy things that happened. I mean, like I said, it's relatively drama-free compared to other lineups, but, the first major thing to talk about is the passing of John Lord. Obviously, he passed away in 2012, which is very sad. And then there's the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing. I can't think of what year that happened off the top of my head. I probably should have looked that up, but myself, I don't really give a toss about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think it's all a bit silly. I'm more about the music, but obviously there's Deep Purple fans out there that were happy to see their favorite band inducted, so nothing wrong with that. There was a little bit of drama there with the whole Richie Blackmore thing, and was he invited, or we invited him, we wanted him to come, we were gonna do Smoke on the Water, but he wasn't gonna come, this, that, the other thing. It seemed like a little that was like a manufactured drama, I feel. I mean, I don't think anyone would have expected Richie Blackmore to go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That definitely does not seem like the kind of thing that Richie would have any interest in, but in any case, it happened. It was cool. Obviously, David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes were both there as well, which was cool. But yeah, we'll dive into the albums themselves. So, let's talk about Now What. This comes out in 2013. I think this is a very, very good album. Again, we're talking, later in their career. There's quite a big break between Rapture of the Deep and this one. There's a 7-year break. Rapture of the Deep coming out in 2005. This is 2013. And I think that really, really helps the band. When I talked about the first run of Mark 8 with Bananas and Rapture of the Deep, those albums are really interesting in the sense that they're kind of edging towards a slightly more proggy direction, but they're also in this sort of state where it's like, they're one of those, older rock bands. They've been around for decades. On one hand, they want to maintain a certain vital spark to their recorded output, but they don't want to go too far beyond that they're going to alienate that core fan base. And that happens with all sorts of bands that have been on the road for as long as, Deep Purple have been. So the fact that they took a break, I think, really recharged them, and I think the end result is an album that's, I think this is far superior to Bananas, or Rapture of the Deep. I would go as far as to say that this is the best album since Perpendicular. I've always considered Perpendicular to be the best thing after 84. This might be on par with Perpendicular. This is a really, really good album. And like I said, there's the fact that they took some time off recording before they went in and did it. I think the fact that John Lord passed away, even though that's a really, really sad thing, I think that probably reinvigorated their purpose a little bit. They wanted to do something that was going to be a meaningful tribute to him, and there are a couple of songs on here that are a direct tribute to John Lord. And I think that kind of lit a fire into their pants, so to speak, and it helped them create something really, really genuinely good. The album cover isn't the greatest album cover in the world. Just the question mark and the exclamation mark. The coloring is pretty cool with the purple against the white. I think the font is kind of cool. They stylized the P as the question mark and the L as the exclamation mark. That's kind of cool, but it's not the greatest album cover in the world. But who cares? It's not about the cover. It's the contents within. We don't judge an album by its cover, do we? And the contents are great. We are kind of following in that proggy direction that's established on Bananas and Rapture of the Deep, but I think they do a little bit more with this. There's a couple of moments on this album that I think are great nods to the classic Mark II period, like the early 70s Mark II period, which we'll get to when we dive deeper into the songs. So, on to the songs. Opens with a track called A Simple Song. And it is anything but. This is it's a pretty elaborate track, really. I really like how the song opens with the vibe of a ballad. Deep Purple, I've talked about. They always have a knack for opening their albums with an absolute barnstormer. The first track is usually very high energy, very in your face, and it smacks you really, really good. This song doesn't do that for the first little bit. It does smack in the face eventually, but the whole first minute and a half or so, like I said, it's very much in a sort of a ballady mood. Some really, really great guitar playing from Steve Morris, very soulful, some cool overdubs there. Gillan sings a very, soft verse at the beginning, and then without warning, boom, the riff kicks in, gets nice and heavy, and, right away the song is not as simple as the title implies. I think Gillan's voice sounds great on here, especially when the heavy riff first kicks in and he has those harmonized parts. I think that's a really, really strong moment. I like how when the chorus comes in for the heavy part, like it does repeat that ballad, the ballad theme, but it's obviously much crunchier and much heavier. Really, really cool stuff. And again, having that contrast between the really quiet intro and outro and then the big heavy stuff in the middle, I think that's fantastic. Again, very, very proggy, and just a very cool, unusual way to open the album. And it is amongst my top tracks on here. Then we move on to track 2. We got a song with a very weird title. We have Weirdistan. Very, very, very odd title, but a really cool riff, very cool song. Kind of got, it's a very snaky riff. It's almost mysterious, and I guess mysterious is probably the best word to describe it, but that dun 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 dun. It doesn't hit you over the head. It's not super heavy, but there's a catchiness to it. I think that's really, really cool. The chorus is very, 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 very good with the oh yes, it's beautiful. I think that works really, really well. Some great solos on it, and I think it makes for good pacing after the kind of sonic roller coaster of simple song. It's nice to have something that's a little bit more streamlined, I suppose. I love the outro as well, how the band kind of fades out, and then it's just Don Airey with that patch kind of repeating the riff until its natural conclusion, which is really cool. And yeah, great piece. We move on to track 3. We get Out of Hand. Very cool song. I don't like it quite as much as the first 2 tracks, but it is really cool. I like the kind of atmospheric intro, and then the orchestral patch comes in, courtesy of Don Airey, and then we go into a big riff. Kind of reminds me of I can't think of what it reminds me of, but it's a good riff in any case. And then that dramatic orchestral thing is present for the verses as well, which is really good. Great pair of solos from courtesy of Airey and Morris, and yeah, good song. Not one of the best on the album, but it is cool. The next one, though, track 4, Hell to Pay, is another really great one. This one I can say definitively reminds me of Cascade's I'm Not Your Lover. Not that it sounds the same, but it's sort of the same sort of spirit. Nice up-tempo track, very catchy. Great verse. Cool chorus as well. Gonna be hell to pay. Sounds really good. Really cool riffing from Morris there. But the highlight of this song is the organ solo. And this is one of the moments on this album that it very much conjures the spirit of that classic early 70s Mark II period. Like, they're never going to reach the same intensity that they did during like those improvisations when they were in their 20s and in the early 70s there. Particularly when they were doing like the Mandrake Root solo after Space Truckin'. But there's something about that organ solo that definitely brings that vibe. Really, really simple backing. We just have, Pacey just slamming quarter notes on the bass drum, and Glover's accentuating it with a single note. But that organ solo is just so manic, and it reminds me of that classic early Mark II period, which is really cool. One of the highlights of the album, just that moment on its own, really, really good. Then we move on to track 5. We got a song called Bodyline. Really good. This is a kind of a loose, jammy sort of a piece. I really like, Pacey kind of sets the groove at the beginning. I really like Morris's plucking at the beginning. There's lots of cool little guitar plucks there. But once that riff kicks in, that is some classic Deep Purple. Excuse me. That stop-start thing, that's a Purple thing. But it's just so groovy, so catchy. Ian Gillan is in fine form on here, just as his typical, funny lyrics in that. Body line, clearly defined, it's your body line. My oh my oh my oh my. But that's I've always found that to be a satisfying lyric. It's just so catchy, the every element of it, the verses, the chorus. It's just overall a really, really cool track. Great hook, and yeah, good classic bit of Purple. One of my favorites on the album. Another highlight for me. Then we'll move on to track 6. We get Above and Beyond. This is a good one. This is the first explicit tribute to Jon Lord. Again, we're kind of in that proggy territory. We have a very, very well-constructed instrumental section in 6/8 there. In 6/8, I should say. And very, very cool keyboard part over that dun 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 ba ba da 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 da. it's hard for me to do it without the rhythm in the background there. But I feel that, I mean, obviously I never met John Lord, but there's something about that keyboard theme that I imagine that's what John Lord's vibe was. And it's just a great little bit of instrumental stuff. The song itself is really cool. It's quite mellow, but it's not a ballad. There's nothing weepy about it. There's nothing, you know, sad about it. You know, it's a very hopeful, optimistic tribute to a man who is, you know, the backbone of Deep Purple. I mean, John Lord, whether he's in the band or not, whether he is on this plane with us or not, you know, he's always the backbone of Deep Purple, and I think a song like Above and Beyond really demonstrates that. Even though he's not here with us, I think his spirit is very much in that song, and I think very, very good tribute, and one of those things that had to be done, right? Moving on to track 7, well into the second half of the album now, we get a track called Blood from a Stone. Another fantastic track. I've always found this interesting because the bass line to me is so similar to You Keep On Moving from Come Taste the Band. And I've mentioned in my other videos, it's kind of funny really that you know, since the '84 reunion comes up, it almost, it's not that it cancels out Mark III and Mark IV, but you know, that becomes a separate offshoot that is essentially abandoned. And then, you know, anything that happens after '84 really has nothing to do with Deep Purple Mark III or Mark IV. So it's fascinating. Here we are with, you know, Deep Purple Mark VIII in 2013, and this song comes out that has that boom, 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 boom. It's not exactly the same, but it's very, very similar to that You Keep On Moving bass riff. I wonder how conscious the members were. I mean, Ian Pace is the only guy that plays on both tracks. I wonder if he caught on to that or not. But bassline aside, the song itself is fantastic. There's some amazing, very ethereal sort of atmospheric guitar work from Steve Morse. Just the little harmonics that he does, and you know, his chord usage is just so tasteful, and it creates such a vibe for you know, overall pretty mellow song. It does wind its way up during the choruses and whatnot. Really cool classic Purple riff. Boom, ba-doodle-doo, boom, da-doo-da-doo. Really good. Yeah, just another great song. But the highlight for me is Morris's guitar playing. He's not doing any flash or anything like that. It's just he's such a master of chords, and he knows what to do to conjure up something you know, real special and unique like that. Then we'll move on to track 8. We get Uncommon Man. This is another tribute to John Lord, and another beautiful song. Again, like the tributes aren't you know, they're hopeful, they're optimistic, they're a very positive experience listening to it. This is based, as the title implies, loosely on Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man. Listeners to the channel, viewers of this channel might think of ELP, because they of course did Fanfare for the Common Man on the Works album. But this is a little bit different. It's more of a reference to it rather than a full-blown cover. But it's still a really cool riff. It's used really well. Da 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 da. It's good to be king. Very, very cool stuff. And again, really good tribute. I think both Above and Beyond and Uncommon Man are they're both fantastic tributes. And yeah, again, it has that proggy element, that classical, the classical vibe gives it that progginess, which I think is really, really good. And it's great that Purple are still doing that kind of thing, or were at the time. This is 11 years old now, which is kind of strange. But yeah, we'll move on to the next track, track 9. I think this could be my favorite track on the album. We have Après Vous. Very, very cool song. The only time that they have a French title, which is kind of cool. I think it's got a great riff. There's something about, I mean, Morris is nothing like Blackmore, but I mean, and his riffs are nothing like Blackmore riffs either, but there's something about his riffs that, I mean, he understands the DNA of Deep Purple, and especially at this point. I mean, we'd been in the band for almost 20 years at this point, so one would think you would have that DNA in there. But really, really good riff. I like the chorus. I think Gillan has a great vocal melody on the chorus there. But the real highlight for me is the solo section, which is absolutely fantastic. Another thing that kind of reminds me of the early '70s improvs and whatnot that they would do. Obviously, it's a much slower pace. Pace he isn't going to be. He's not doing the same theme, the same drum beat that he was doing for like the Mandrake Root jams. But the bass line is really, really cool. And then it's really just a phenomenal showcase for both Steve Morse and Don Airey. Which is, again, it's so interesting. I mean, back in the '70s, the classic Mark II period, I mean, it's essentially this band, but with different soloists. You have John Lord and Ritchie Blackmore. Now it's Steve Morse and Don Airey. Steve Morse is obviously, he is an extremely distinctive guitar player. He is his own man when it comes to what he does on the guitar. Nothing like Ritchie Blackmore whatsoever, but I think there is a stylistic lineage between John Lord and Don Airey, and I think that's important because obviously, he brings that to Deep Purple and he kind of keeps that spirit of John Lord alive. But it's just great having a record where Morse and Airey are trading solo licks back and forth. The build up to get to the real craziness on the solo section is fantastic as well. It starts out very, very mellow, very pensive. There's certain, you can sense that something is about to explode, and then by the time we get to the end and they start doing the fast runs, they do some unison runs in it, and it's just a fantastic, fantastic moment. Best thing on the album, in my opinion, and that's saying something because it's a very, very good album. So Après Vous, fantastic track for me. Then we get to track 10. We get All the Time in the World. And it is interesting. I mean, this is the first time in a couple of albums where there really isn't any ballads on it. Like even the John Lord tributes are, they're heavy songs. They're heartfelt, but they're not ballads. All the Time in the World is probably the closest we could get to a ballad, but it's still a lot more high energy than, say, Haunted or Clearly Quite Absurd from Bananas and Rapture of the Deep, respectively. This is a little bit more poppy, I would think, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's certainly not my favorite thing on the album. I think if I did have a least favorite, this is probably it. But still good. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a relatively short song. The closest thing to a ballad, but not quite a ballad. And it's all right. And then the album wraps up with track 11, Vincent Price. Very cool song. This was actually released as a single. Weird having a single that ends up being the finale for the album. But it's a cool song. It is, there's a deliberately creepy sort of element to it. Obviously, like talking about Vincent Price and horror movies and the it feels so good to be afraid. That whole, this is why people, pay good money to go to a movie theater and get the socks scared off of them. But the deliberately creepy elements, I mean, if there is a criticism to this song, is it feels a little bit novelty, like they're trying too hard to conjure up that image, but it's a minor complaint. It is still a really good song, really good riff, great solos as well. I think that main theme, dun 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 dun, I think that's really good. We do get a Gillan scream, of all things. There's, the last thing one would expect at this stage in his career, but the very, very end, Gillan gives us a pretty decent scream. And again, for his age, that's pretty impressive. For his age at the time, he's 11 years older now, like I said. But yeah, Vincent Price is a cool way to wrap the album up. Not one of my favorite songs on the album, but I think it does its job of closing the album quite nicely. And there we have it. There's Now What. Obviously, I should also point out, I completely forgot to mention the notable contributor to this, who is, of course, Bob Ezrin, the famous producer. I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the this review, but there you go. And Ezrin becomes a pretty essential component to the band, basically, from this point on. Every single album has been produced by Bob Ezrin ever since, including the new one, Equals One. So, there you go. So moving on, we get to the next album, which is Infinite. This came out in 2017, also produced by Bob Ezrin. I mentioned his name before I talked about the album this time, so that's a good thing. And this album kind of creeped up on me. I mean, like I said, I took a little bit of a break from Deep Purple to kind of listen to this stuff with fresh ears. It's been a couple of years since I'd listened to this one, actually, and you know, going through the discography leading up to this point, my recollection was that like Now What was really, really good, and then it was, you know, the law of diminishing returns. Like it kind of, it started to slope down a little bit. But I was quite corrected when I listened to this. I was kind of surprised at how good it was. It was better than I remembered it, and I remember I really enjoyed it when it came out. But you know, having not heard it for a while, I just kind of thought, oh yeah, like the songs weren't freshly in my head, and I just kind of assumed that it was notably of a less quality than Now What, but that is not correct. I still think Now What is the better record, but this is pretty damn close. Like, this is still a really good album. I'd still put this one quite a bit higher than Bananas or Rapture of the Deep, for example. So, yeah, they are continuing, and you know, those proggy elements are still present on here. There's one song in here that's very, very proggy. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, they're just kind of, you know, keeping that Deep Purple thing going, and it's funnily it still sounds fairly fresh to my ears. If there is, you know, a detriment, is it doesn't have the wild solo sections that Now What has, which is, you know, a bit of a shame. But there's still lots of great moments for both Don Airey and Steve Morse on here. So yeah, it's still a very good album, a surprisingly good album. The album cover is a bit of an improvement, but it is still a little bit strange. You know, the whole icebreaker ship in the Arctic carving out both the DP logo as well as an infinity symbol, which is kind of cool. One thing that I found very entertaining about the album cover here, I think it's in the booklet. It's funny how the band picture is them legitimately in the Arctic. Knowing them, they had a gig up there because they play literally everywhere in the world. Yeah, their tours are just crazy. That's I don't think it's in the main book here. That's nonsense. I have to take the CD out now to show you. But if you have this album, you already know what I'm about to show you. So I don't know what's going on. But I've always found the image of the band in the ice to be quite entertaining. Obviously, a reference to Deep Purple and rock, but in this case, it's Deep Purple in ice, in a glacier, in a glacial freeze. Which it's kind of funny. I've always the concept has always been a little bit cheesy to me, but it's cool that they did that on this album cover to bring forth a little bit of conceptual continuity into their catalog to make a Zappa reference, because obviously we know Zappa had a big part of played a big role in Deep Purple's career as well. But we'll talk about Zappa in another video sometime in the future. But anyway, we'll talk about the songs on Infinite. Like I said, good batch of songs. Opens with track 1, Time for Bedlam. I think this is a really, really good opener. I mean, Deep Purple, they're known for having great openers, but I love the sort of mystical vibe that you get. We get those the chime sounds and some menacing keyboard and synthesizer patches. Gillan does a very, very heavily processed spoken word part, which is really cool. And it all winds its way up into this pretty fast-paced shuffle, and just a great track. Almost, I remember it always it reminded me of Dream Theater. I was like, wow, Deep Purple's doing like Dream Theater intros now. But it's a really good groove. Like I said, it's kind of got a bit of a bouncy sort of a shuffle vibe to it. Great lyrics. I love Gillan's line there. Suckling my milk from the venomous tit of the state. Those words would ring even more true 7 years later in 2024, wouldn't they? But yeah, Time for Bedlam is a really great track. Very, very short. You know, the songs are, even though there's those proggy elements, the songs are for the most part pretty short on here, which is there's nothing wrong with that. And then it winds its way back to that sort of, you know, ambient mystical intro for the outro. We get more of Gillan's this very strange spoken word stuff, which is it treads a fine line between the like prophetic and the absurd, I think, which is really, really cool. But there's a seriousness to it, right? Like, I think the last thing that he says, the last thing he says in the spoken word thing, I believe, is "I was justified." And it's very serious, and it's very, you know, intense, and you're kind of left going, wow, with bated breath. And then track 2 kicks in, and we get You can bury me up to my knees in shit. That's a great opening line, and I love the contrast from the seriousness of Time for Bedlam into this really fun, bouncy groove. Hip Boots is one of my favorite tracks on the album. That is track 2, obviously. Track 2 is Hip Boots. I think it's a fantastic song. There's some great humor in the lyrics. Like I said, that contrast works really, really well, but that is such a classic Deep Purple riff. Bum-ba-down, bum-ba-down, ba-ba-da-down. It's almost like, is this like Black Knight of 2017? I don't know. But it's a riff that is very distinctly Deep Purple, and it's one of those things, like, you know, like I said before, I mean, the spirit of Deep Purple has become so infused in, you know, Morris's guitar playing, in the context of playing with Purple, of course, that, yeah, he just comes out with these great riffs, even though he's nothing like Ritchie Blackmore at all. The Deep Purple belongs just as much to Steve Morris as it does Blackmore, I think, at this point. I mean, like, obviously Steve Morris spent a lot more time with the band, even though he's not, you know, he's not as prolific in terms of what he does on record. You know, just him being in the band as long as he has. I mean, he's, you know, I would argue he's got just as much of a right to lay claim as, you know, Deep Purple's guitar player as Ritchie does, right? But we'll see how history views that several years down the line. But anyway, like I said, Hip Boots is a great track. I'm a big fan. Great solos, great riff, great bit of, you know, Ian Gillan, who I should say is kind of really emphasizing the lower register of his voice, which is natural at his age. But it sounds good. I mean, his voice sounds decent. I mean, he's never going to have the tone that he used to, but, you know, he's still full of confidence, and I still think the voice sounds good, even though it is a little more nasally now. But anyway, track 3, we get All I Got Is You. Great track, another kind of swingy, shuffly sort of a song. Great, this is a great showcase for Don Airey at the keyboard. There's some really, really cool keyboard parts on here. There's an urgency to the groove, but there's also a certain melancholy to the song, and I think lyrically there's this interesting balance between, you know, dealing with, you know, the heartbreak of a broken relationship, but there's also a certain ambivalence or irreverence to it as well. I love that last line where Gillan throws in the F-bomb. I don't give a fucking damn, and then that cool riff, doodle-a-doo, 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 great way to release the tension that's built up from that sort of melancholic vibe throughout the verses. And when that riff kicks in, it's really, really cool. And yeah, another great track. First 3 tracks are on fire. Then we get to track 4. We have One Night in Vegas. Really good song, probably a little bit more generic than the first 3, but it is very, very cool. There's some great piano work on here. Don Airey switches from the organ and the synthesizer to do some classic piano stuff on here. Yeah, just a great song. I got married in Las Vegas. Not your eloping wedding like we did. We did invite a whole slew of friends and family down there. I can't think of like the specific lyrical content for the song One Night in Vegas, but hearing that chorus, oh, one night in Vegas, obviously that brings memories of, well, it was a number of nights that we spent in Vegas, but we had a good time. We had a very good time. And I got married, so that's cool. I really like the descending chorus. I think that sounds really, really cool. There's also a really great piano fill right towards the end of the song. You think the song is going to wind up, and then Airey gets that. I think that part's really cool. And, yeah, good track. Like I said, not quite as strong as the first 3, but it's a cool song, and it belongs on the album. We move on to track 5. We Get Me Outta Here. Pretty cool track. The drum sound at the very intro is just bizarre. I mean, it's obviously processed that way very on purpose, but you get this ridiculously large drum sound. The bass drum sounds like it's about 40 feet high. The snare drum is completely ridiculous. Like, it was like you're dealing with, you know, a 40-foot high bass drum and the deepest snare drum you've ever seen, and then you put it in the Cologne Cathedral or somewhere that's got you know, an amazing acoustic capability. Really, it's a bizarre drum intro. I think the drums tone down as the song kind of kicks in, but it's a cool track. Very slow pace. Just a dirgy, sludgy sort of a riff. Boom, doom, 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 doo, 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 doo. I think I combined that with another riff when I was doing it out loud, but it's a cool song. I think Gillan's lyrics are really good. You know, kind of talking about getting ready to fight. Boom, doom, doom, doom. I'm doing it again. My mind is in a different is in somewhere else right now. But I really like Get Me Out of Here. I think it's a good song. It's nice having those slower tempo, dirgy kind of numbers around. Yeah, decent track. We get to track 6, which is The Surprising. And I've always found it quite surprising that I don't like this track more. This is probably the most proggy thing on the album. Might be the most proggy thing that the band ever did, at least with Steve Morrison on board. And it's really good. Again, like I almost got the, you know, it's like Deep Purple trying to do like a Dream Theater sort of a thing. It's not as heavy as Dream Theater. In fact, it's quite light for the most part. I do like the arpeggiated guitar part. I think it's got a great atmosphere. There's some good heavy bits to it, some you know, technical bits, and but it's never quite done anything for me. I mean, I think, you know, it's trying to conjure up the spirit of songs like you know, the title track from Rapture of the Deep, or Before Time Began from the same album. But for whatever reason, it just never quite grabbed me like I feel it should. But there you go. What can you do, right? It's a good song, but it's just weirdly not to my taste. And then we get track 7, Johnny's Band. This is a great one. This is kind of, you know, back into a typical rocker, really. But I think it's really good. I love the keyboard thing that goes on there. That I think that works really well. And then the main riff, actually, I find it's like a distant cousin to the Junkyard Blues riff. Again, there's a lot of references to Rapture of the Deep on here, but I still think this is a better album than Rapture of the Deep. I just like that riff. There's something about, you know, for a guitar player as accomplished as Steve Morris. I think it's great that he's able to create a riff that conjures up a vibe of naivety, or innocence with a guitar. And I think it really that suits the spirit of the song, as, you know, talking about the vibe I get is, you know, just a bunch of high school kids learning their instruments and starting a band, and you know, going forth into the world. Maybe the song has nothing to do with that. I've got no idea. I'm not as well read on the lyrics of these albums as I probably could be, but could or should be. But the vibe of the music and the lyrics that I get on surface level, that seems to be what it's about. But it's really good. And I think that whole thing about having a very experienced guitar player create something that conjures up a certain innocence and naivete reminds me of a Robert Fripp quote where he says, you know, the responsibility of the artist is to maintain an assumption of innocence within a field of experience, and that's how you can you know, maintain a creative atmosphere for oneself. And even though you gain more experience and you gain more knowledge, if you can put yourself in that same place you were when you first discovered this kind of stuff, that's where the real good creative juice lies. I think that's what that quote means anyway. But yeah, Johnny's Band, great track. It kind of brings the album back on track to a certain extent. And yeah, good song. We move on to track 8. We get On Top of the World. This is another one of my favorites. I think this is a great riff. I think that's really cool. It's for the most part a really simple song. You know, unlike a simple song from the last album there, but I think it's really good. I think it's got a great chorus to it. It's got a great vibe. My favorite part actually is the spoken word bridge, which is a classic bit of Ian Gillan. Again, he with his spoken word stuff on this album, he threads such a great line between like prophetic and mystical and totally absurd, and he conjures up this story about his encounter with the most beautiful girl in the universe, Venus in heaven, and all this weird, absurd stuff happens, and then he goes up to the 24th floor or whatever and walks out into open air, and then I love his last line, and that's why I don't like heights no more. And then that riff comes in. Just so infectious. It's really good stuff. yeah, great, just a great song. Just a great bit of classic Deep Purple in 2017. And then we get to track 9, Birds of Prey, another really great song. I love the guitar intro. That's another one of those cases where we're kind of seeing Steve Morris's Florida roots, that kind of swampy style. That sounds really, really cool. And then it's another really slow paced sort of a track. It's not as dirgy. It's a little bit more grand and epic. It's a great riff though. Boom, doom, 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 doodle, doodle, doo. I think that sounds really good. For all intents and purposes, this really is the last song on the album. This is kind of the true finale. It's the last original on the album, but it really does kind of conjure up vibes of a grand finale, right? I think it's really, really good. There's some great solos again by Morris and Ari on there. And yeah, there's a certain triumphant quality to it as well, and I think it's a great way to close the album. Like I said, for all intents and purposes, Birds of Prey, another highlight, really good song. But of course, the album proper does end with a cover on track 10, which is Roadhouse Blues, their tribute to the Doors and Jim Morrison there. It really does feel more like a bonus track. Like I said, Birds of Prey, I think, there's a finality to that wraps up, the statement that they're going for. And then, Roadhouse Blues just kind of seems to be a bonus track. But it's a good cover. It's I like how they make it their own, obviously. I particularly like the drum intro because Pacey's throwing in all kinds of offbeats on the snare. Like, it's not a traditional shuffle by any means. Once the track kicks in and we get into that classic groove, he does go into a traditional shuffle. I like how Steve Morris gets a little shout out before the solo. Hey Stevie, what's up? I think that's kind of fun. And yeah, it's a nice way to kind of wrap things up, but it does feel more like a bonus track. And then they were even more explicit with that with the next album, Whoosh, where they or is it Whoosh? I don't know. Whoosh, I don't know. Blah, blah, blah. But that one is funny because the album proper ends with "And the Address," which of course is the first song on the first album, Shades of Deep Purple, and then they put a bonus track after that, and it's on all editions of the album. It's not like Rapture the Deep, where if you bought the limited edition, you could get all the bonus tracks. I forgot to talk about one of the bonus tracks on that album when I did the review, but it's too late now, isn't it? But yeah, I found it kind of funny how the standard edition of Whoosh had, a bonus track, and there's no separation. Like, it goes right from "And the Address" directly into the bonus track, which I found kind of weird. But and then that's the other thing. I'll get more into this on my next video. But I thought by finishing with "And the Address" on Whoosh, I thought, wow, what a great way to wrap up their career. They finished like the last song on the last album is the same song as the first song on the first album, but obviously, that was not their last album because there is more material that's been released since then, which is all well and good. But yeah, they're not getting any younger. But I still think the new album is pretty good. I think we'll talk about Equals One fairly shortly. But yeah, that is Infinite, a surprisingly good album, and it's one that kind of crept up on me. My long distance recollection of it was that it wasn't as good as Now What. I still believe Now What is the better album of the two, but they're very close. Like I said, this is still better than the other Mark 8 stuff, in my opinion. It's Bananas and Rapture the Deep. Probably better than Abandoned too, to be honest. But yeah, there we go. Appreciate you watching my semi-coherent ramblings here. Apologies once again. There is a chance there might be a bit of a lull. There might be a couple of weeks before the next video comes out. If I can get it out sooner than later, I certainly will. But yeah, just with everything that's going on between my gig coming up and just being a busy dad and busy at work and all that, there will be gaps in my my YouTube uploading, but stay patient. I'll always be back one way or another. I promise it at the end of every video, like I'm going to in this case right now. Before I go ahead and not tell you about subscribing and liking and sharing and all the rest of that fun stuff, I don't say that because I'm not a conformist. But as promised, even if it takes a little bit of time, you will see me in the future. Thanks for watching, and yeah, take care. Bye-bye.